30 minutes. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will pursue war against Hamas to the end. Defense Minister Gallant says Hamas has lost control in Gaza. Hamas armed wing says it discussed freeing 70 hostages in return for 5-day truce with Qatari mediators, says truce should include a complete ceasefire. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar meets UK Foreign Secretary James Cleverly and Defence Secretary Grant Shapps, also addresses Indian community in London. The 42nd edition of India International Trade Fair 2023 is set to be inaugurated today in New Delhi. Over 3,000 exhibitors from both India and abroad to participate. On to details now. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday met with commanders and soldiers of the Caracal Battalion at one of the assembly points near the Gaza Strip fence. During his visit, the Prime Minister thanked the soldiers for their service and asserted that Israel will pursue war against Hamas to the end.
An extraordinary achievement, truly amazing. There are no words. I think that what you have done here, you simply decided the battle here. Men and women soldiers with daring and extraordinary resourcefulness. Well done. This says a lot. To turn the tide from the worst situation imaginable, this says a lot. This is also what we are doing now with the forces that are inside. This is neither an operation nor a round, but a war to the end. It is important to me that you know this. This is not lip service, but from the heart and mind. If we do not finish them, it will come back.
Also, Israeli Defense Minister Gallant has said Hamas has lost control of the Gaza Strip it has ruled for 16 years. After an assessment of the fighting, Gallant said Israeli forces are advancing according to plans and carry out the tasks accurately, lethally. He said IDF has intensified activity against Hamas tunnels in recent days. The Israeli Defense Force spokesperson said the Israeli military is operating inside Gaza to ensure the safe release of the 239 Israeli hostages and is combining all three modes of land, air and naval forces in the war. And the armed wing of Hamas has said they told Qatari mediators that the group is ready to release up to 70 women and children held in Gaza in return for a 5-day truce. Spokesperson for the armed wing of Hamas said the truce should include a complete ceasefire and allowing aid and humanitarian relief everywhere in the Gaza Strip. Israel launched its campaign last month to annihilate Hamas, the group that runs the Gaza Strip, after Hamas gunmen rampaged through southern Israel, killing civilians. Around 1,200 people died and 240 were dragged to Gaza as hostages, according to Israel's tally. Well, this comes as the Israeli military claimed that Hamas was using hospitals for hiding and storing weapons in children's hospital basement in Gaza, adding that hostages were also likely to be held there.
I went to the hospital with a video camera and personally documented more concrete evidence. The concrete evidence are that Hamas uses hospitals as an instrument of war. Underneath the hospital, in the basement, we found a Hamas command and control center, suicide bomb vests, grenades, AK-47 assault rifles, explosive devices, RPGs and other weapons, computers, money, etc. And we also found signs that indicate that Hamas held hostages here. This is currently under our investigation, but we also have intelligence that verifies it.
Also, the White House on Monday said that the U.S. is working to get the release of hostages held in Gaza.
So we have been very transparent about the fact that we have limited visibility into both the whereabouts of the hostages within Gaza and their condition. And I said as recently as yesterday that we have 9 missing Americans, 1 missing green card holder, and I cannot look in the eye and tell you how many of those hostages are still alive. We do have information, and I'll be careful about how I characterize that, about some of the hostages and a notion that there are a substantial number of hostages who are not just alive, but who could potentially be part of a hostage release. But I couldn't give you a number of exactly how many Americans would be included in that. That's something that we will have to work through as we continue these negotiations. And of course, we won't know for certain until we actually get the release of those hostages and they're safely returned to their families. So that's something we're going to continue to work on.
Well, the U.S. Supreme Court has formally adopted its first code of ethics after press reports earlier this year revealed justices accepting lavish vacations and gifts paid for by rich benefactors who often had strong political, social and religious beliefs. Tony Waterman has more.
In a brief statement released alongside this new code of conduct, the justices said that the rules are in fact not new at all, that the principles have always governed the court's conduct. Included in the code are 5 canons of conduct requiring justices to refrain from political activity and to uphold the independence of the judiciary, which includes not allowing family, social, political, financial, or other relationships to influence official conduct or judgment. But the justices failed to explain how exactly the code will work or who will enforce it. Now, it may be hard to believe, but the U.S. Supreme Court has never had to adhere to a code of ethics, even though just about every other judge in the United States does. Instead, the Constitution says Supreme Court justices can serve as long as they exhibit good behavior. But what constitutes good behavior has been thrown into question after a series of media reports raised concerns about the influence inside America's highest court. ProPublica reported that conservative Justice Clarence Thomas never disclosed lavish vacations and tuition paid for by a Republican mega donor. Justice Samuel Alito never disclosed a paid-for luxury trip to Alaska with another conservative donor, while the Associated Press alleges that liberal Justice Sonia Sotomayor's staff prodded public institutions to buy her books, works that have earned her millions of dollars. The reports, alongside controversial rulings in the past few years, including the overturning of abortion rights in the U.S., have tarnished the court's reputation. And a recent Gallant poll found that public trust and approval in the court is near record lows. In Austin, Tony Waterman reporting for DD India.
Well, the U.S. House of Representatives voted on Monday to pause the effort to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, halting a Republican campaign that alleges he has been derelict in his duty of managing the U.S.-Mexico border. The articles of impeachment introduced by Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene on Thursday contend that Mayorkas, an appointee of Democratic President Joe Biden, violated his oath of office by failing to constrain the record numbers of migrants arriving at the border. The House voted to refer the articles back to the House Homeland Security Committee, which is carrying out its own investigation of Mayorkas's alleged dereliction of duty. The move comes as Congress has less than 5 days to extend funding or see the U.S. into its 4th partial government shutdown in a decade. And former U.S. President Donald Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., defended his father's real estate portfolio during a civil fraud trial. Trump and 2 of his sons have been accused of inflating his net worth by as much as $2.2 billion to secure better financing. The lawsuit by New York Attorney General seeks at least $250 million in damages, as well as restrictions that would bar Trump and his sons from state's real estate industry. Donald Trump Jr. accused the authorities of carrying out a witch hunt against his family. His father is one of President Joe Biden's main challengers in the 2024 polls. Moving on, strengthening bilateral ties with UK, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar met with newly appointed UK Home Secretary James Cleverly in London on Monday. Jaishankar, who is currently on an official visit to the UK, expressed appreciation for Cleverly's unwavering support, underscoring the continued strength of the strategic partnership between India and the UK. Both leaders not only discussed the importance of mobility, skills and talent in the development of our bilateral cooperation, but also exchanged views on addressing shared concerns on extremism, economic offences, trafficking and security. Earlier, Dr. Jaishankar engaged in a discussion with UK Defence Secretary Grant Shapps. Bolstering defence and security cooperation between the two nations took the centre stage during their discussion. Jaishankar also highlighted the promising avenues for collaboration through the Make in India initiative, offering new opportunities for British partners. The leaders also exchanged perspectives on pressing global security challenges, emphasising the convergences in their strategic approaches. And British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's new cabinet meets for the first time later on Tuesday. He brought former Prime Minister David Cameron back into government as Foreign Secretary as part of a wider ministerial reshuffle. DD India's Ollie Barrett reports from London.
Well, when that new cabinet gathers for the first time, it will be familiar in many ways for David Cameron, who has sat round the cabinet table in Downing Street many times before. But previously it was as Prime Minister, and his is absolutely the most surprising face that will be gathering at Cabinet later on. Very much a surprise for all of Westminster to see David Cameron, the former Prime Minister, returning to government at the request of Rishi Sunak to take on that Foreign Secretary role. This his first full day in the new job, although on his first day on Monday, he was already busy meeting, among other people, the External Affairs Minister of India, Dr. Jaishankar, who was in London expecting to meet with James Cleverly, but in the end meeting with David Cameron, the new Foreign Secretary, instead. This broader reshuffle, which has seen a new Health Secretary, a new Environment Secretary, a new Home Secretary as well after Suella Braverman was sacked, is designed by Rishi Sunak to be a reset ahead of the next general election. He wants the best possible team in place to get ready to fight that election. The opposition Labour Party say that this reshuffle is laughable in their words. They say that Rishi Sunak has been trying to present himself as a candidate of change, but that he heads up a government that now has a Foreign Secretary who's being recalled to government after several years away and having previously been Prime Minister of a Conservative administration. So a controversial appointment in other ways too. Some Conservatives feel that David Cameron's foreign policy wasn't very successful when he was Prime Minister, and they wonder whether he is the best man for the job as a result. But Rishi Sunak sees him as someone who can appeal to voters in the centre ground of British politics. As I say, he is gearing up for an election campaign which will have to begin at some point fairly soon. The next election in the UK has to be called by January 2025, but could be earlier than that.
Middle East and the support for Ukraine. While ramping up diplomatic pressure for pauses in the fighting, the minister set out the EU's vision for what the future of peace for Middle East could look like. Alex Cardier reports from Brussels.
European Union member states have started to try and imagine what a lasting peace in the Middle East could look like after this latest war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. But agreeing the first step towards that peace remains a challenge. Some member states have started calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, urging Israel to show restraint in its bombing campaign. Last week, French President Emmanuel Macron joined the ranks of European leaders, going beyond a call for pauses, opting instead to call for a full ceasefire. Others, like German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock, aren't convinced yet. Minister Baerbock said too many questions about how a ceasefire could or would be enforced remain. Nevertheless, the assembled ministers set out 6 points for a lasting peace between Israel and Palestine. The plan includes 3 no's: no to the forced displacement of Gazans, no reduction in the size of Gaza, and no to the return of Hamas. It also includes 3 yeses: yes to Gazans being involved in the solution, yes to a single authority for all Palestinian territories, and yes to more EU involvement. The ministers also continued their work on supporting Ukraine. The EU's top diplomat, Josep Borrell, said that Ukraine remains the EU's top priority and that the Union would continue to work out a way to ensure long-term support for Ukraine. The meeting will now be followed by the EU's defence ministers meeting in Brussels on Tuesday. The situation in the Middle East and Ukraine will of course both be on the agenda, as will a new plan for a European rapid deployment force. 5,000 troops from around the EU who would stand by to respond to crises around the world at a moment's notice. A force which EU leaders are understandably eager to have up and running. Alex Kadier in Brussels reporting for DD India.
And now let's take a look at other stories making news around the world. Yoichiro Adachi, an 18th generation cormorant fisherman, uses trained birds to catch ayu sweetfish in Japan's ukai tradition. However, climate change and heavy rains have delayed the ayu's spawning period, leading to a decline in catches. Fishermen have turned to tourism to supplement income. Gyunse's auction house is set to host an online auction on December 14th featuring over 30 lots from the 20th century, including Elvis Presley's 6th grade report card and Bob Dylan's first album master recordings. The auction includes a handwritten note from President John F. Kennedy, Elvis Presley's 6th grade report card and an unopened copy of the Beatles' album. A lion named Kimba escaped from an Italian circus and was on the loose for 7 hours before being sedated with an anesthetic dart. Local authorities are investigating how the lion managed to escape its metal enclosure. Mayor Alexandra Grando plans to ask council experts to check if there are legal grounds to revoke circus permits in Ladipuslaw. Joby Aviation, an electric aircraft manufacturer, has successfully launched its first electric air taxi flight at the downtown Manhattan heliport in New York City. The company, in partnership with Delta Airlines, aims to offer fast, emissions-free journey and reduce helicopter noise impact. The company plans to begin commercial passenger service in 2025 and has received FAA certification for flight testing. And still to come on this edition of DD India Live. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen hosts APEC finance ministers in San Francisco. The biggest ever international trade fair to begin at India's capital city of New Delhi. We'll tell you more about the theme ahead.
Welcome to Jaipur.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Vipakshi Khurana, and moving on. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has called on Pacific Rim finance ministers to work on financing the transition to low-carbon energy with a focus on achieving net zero goals. U.S., China and Australia are among nations that are part of the Pacific Rim. Yellen's remark came as she opened a meeting of finance ministers of Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC countries, in San Francisco.
We need to put ourselves on a sustainable growth path, one where we safeguard our planet while providing our economies with the clean energy they need to grow. And we need to leverage emerging technologies to drive innovation while maintaining safe financial markets. With that, thank you again for your work and the work of your teams throughout this year and for being here today. It's a key opportunity to recognize our accomplishments and reaffirm our commitment to more progress.
Moving on, India's capital city of New Delhi is all set to host the biggest ever international trade fair at the Pragati Maidan complex. Thousands of participants from several countries are likely to visit Delhi for the mega event. Take a look at this report by DD India correspondent Devyendu Mundal.
After the successful completion of the G20 summit in September this year, Delhi is once again gearing up to host another mega event at the newly redeveloped Pragati Maidan complex. This time, Delhi is all set to host the biggest ever 42nd edition of the India International Trade Fair. The theme, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, United by Trade. Countries from across the world will gather at the national capital to participate at this mega international event. Women entrepreneurs from the SAARC countries will be a key focus of this year's trade fair. SAARC countries like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, Maldives, Nepal and Bhutan will also set up pavilions to showcase their best products and businesses to the world. Other countries like Turkey, Qatar, Bahrain will also be major participants at the International Trade Fair. The mega event is scheduled to be held between the 14th and the 27th of November this year. More than 1 million people are expected to visit this international trade fair this year. Spread over 1 lakh square meters, the 14 halls of the swanky Pragati Maidan complex will showcase businesses and innovations from across the world. At home, states like Bihar, Jharkhand and Kerala will be the partner states for this edition of the International Trade Fair, while states like Uttar Pradesh, Delhi, Jammu and Kashmir and Maharashtra will be the focus states. Not only this, visitors and participants will also have an experience of cuisines from across 30 states of India at the mega open food zone at the trade fair. This mega 13-day event in the national capital has already started creating a buzz amongst the business communities from across the world. And the event will further enhance India's image at the world stage. Devyendu Mondal's report for DD India.
And a delegation led by Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Centre visited the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Centre in Dubai to enhance collaboration between Indian and Emirati space sectors. The delegation included Indian space startups sharing expertise in various space activities. In space, updated MBRSC on recent space sector reforms in India, empowering the private sector. MBRSC provided insights into their space programs, expressing optimism about collaboration. And Indian Ambassador Sanjay Sudhir emphasized India's role at the Dubai Air Show, highlighting the participation of the Sarang display team and LCA Tejas. Sudhir stressed the significance of defense engagement and the strong strategic partnership between India and the UAE, expressing satisfaction with progress since 2017. He noted the Dubai Air Show as a platform solidifying their multifaceted relationship, citing achievements in various aspects, including defense engagement. India's presence at the premier aerospace event underscores its commitment to excellence and innovation in aviation.
India is participating in Dubai Air Show this year in a big way. 2 of our indigenous aircraft, Sarang helicopter, as well as LCA Tejas, are participating. Both are doing air display. This year, Tejas Squadron participated in Operation Desert Flag. And I think that was a big success to show to the world our indigenous production capacities.
Well, in U.S., investors are cautious after the U.S. credit rating was downgraded last week, with a possible government shutdown looms this weekend. And key inflation data is due to be out this week. Sally Patterson has more from New York.
Investors this week have their eyes on the upcoming US Consumer Price Index report for October, which is due out on Tuesday. Economists expect core CPI growth, which strips out food and energy, to remain steady at 0.3% month over month. This key inflation data could give an indication of what the Federal Reserve might do at their next rate decision in December. Fed Chair Jerome Powell has said he wouldn't rule out a rate hike. Also coming up this week, the producer price report for October and October retail sales data, which should offer clues about consumer health. Investors are also digesting last week's decision by Moody's Investor Service to lower its US credit rating outlook from stable to negative. The ratings firm cited the nation's worsening fiscal position and political polarization for the downgrade. At the close of trading Monday, the Dow was up 0.2%, the S&P was flat, and the Nasdaq ended down 0.2%. Sally Patterson in New York, reporting for DD India.
Well, that's all for this edition of DD India Live. But let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Nipakshi Khurana from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live.